In January, we did my annual 31 Days to a More Effective Compliance program where we looked at one thing you could do each day. Well, we're back with the Compliance Tip of the Day. This is the podcast where we bring you daily insights and practical advice on navigating the ever-evolving landscape of compliance requirements. Whether you're a seasoned compliance professional or just starting your journey, my aim in this podcast is to provide you with a bite-sized, actionable tip to help you stay on top of your compliance game. In the chaotic world of 2025 and beyond, compliance will become even more important, and you staying on top of your game will help your company move forward. Today on the Compliance Tip of the Day, we take up the intersection of risk assessments and internal controls. I know you'll enjoy this episode. How should you use a risk assessment as a tool to provide a structured approach to establish effective internal controls? After preparation of the risk assessment, the next step is to prioritize the listing of risks and which locations they are common. This begins by mapping existing internal controls to the risks, then assessing whether the internal controls are sufficient to mitigate the risks. To help consistency in this evaluation process, it may be useful to assign a risk weight to each of the elements in the risk assessment. For example, a construction company might assign a higher weight to the presence of a movable fixed asset, while a company which sells exclusively through local distributors might assign a higher weight to the sales function than one that exclusively uses company employees for sales activities. However it is structured, the assessment should result in the assignment of individual risk scores and a composite risk score for each location. These scores can then be used to prioritize the location in terms of dealing with control risks. One of the biggest risks in compliance is where sales are conducted through third parties. If your company is moving to a new geographic area or has a new product or a new customer base and does not plan to use internal control teams, sales teams to facilitate these efforts, it presents a high compliance risk. There are numerous FCPA enforcement actions where this has occurred. The compliance function should understand the corporate or business unit controls over international business in addition to the necessary controls over agents. Some of the questions you might consider are the following. Is there a U.S.-based sales manager who is responsible for growing the business? What is the incentive compensation plan? How are your statements of direction? In other words, can the international sales manager unilaterally make a high-risk decision, or must senior officer of the business unit or the corporate home office be a part of the approval process? What about the situation opposite to the above, where your company's primary sales channel uses a U.S.-based sales force which only travels to locations outside the U.S. for temporary visas of generally short duration? This situation minimizes, retains, and shifts some of the compliance risks. The minimized compliance risks come from the lessening of reliance on third parties so that a company, at least in theory, would have more control over its own workforce than those employed outside the company. The retained risks are the risks associated with gifts, travel, and entertainment, approval of credit to customers, product pricing, special arrangements with customers, knowing who the ultimate customer is and where the goods are ultimately being shipped. That's becoming extraordinarily important in 2025. Shifting and shifted risks are created if there's no physical location outside the U.S. because the accounting must be done in the U.S. Obviously, the COSO framework can be a key framework for you to use, and it created a more formal structure to design or assess the effectiveness of your internal controls. So what are today's three key takeaways? Number one, third-party risks are your highest risk under the FCPA, so use your internal controls appropriately to help prevent the risk from becoming a full-blown legal violation. Two, use mapping and a gap analysis to collate risks to your existing controls. And three, always consider the regional and geographic variances in your sales force and look and see if that variance exists in your internal controls. One of the things that I'm happy to do for you, the compliance profession, is if you have a question or a series of questions you would like some compliance tips on, I'm happy to take any requests that you might want, certainly anonymize them, and give you a quick tip. Either one quick tip or maybe a week's worth of quick tips. So if you have any tips you want about your compliance program, you can shoot me an email at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. This podcast was created and produced with the assistance of AI.